So, George, let's start with Brexit. Where, in your estimation, is it going to end?
I think the most likely outcome is a long delay, but that doesn't mean that's certain, because we could either leave with no deal or we could revoke Article 50.
Do you think that's the fundamental choice?
I think you may well find that's the fundamental choice, because if we're heading for a departure without a deal, the only way to stop it in the last moment is to revoke Article 50.
And you don't sense that your party is moving to no deal and might somehow get a few others to help it over the line?
Well, I think the centre of gravity is moving, unfortunately, in the Conservative Parliamentary Party towards supporting a departure without a deal. Partly out of frustration, partly because the Brexiteers have the whip hand.
And what would your view be of and people going about Project Fear, not least because the campaign that you ran in the referendum, no deal, what does it mean?
Well, I think there's both a short-term cost to no deal. I mean, all the things about supplies and medicines and aeroplanes not being able to land and so on. Personally, I think the even more damaging impact is the long-term reputation of the country and its relationship with its nearest neighbours, like France and Germany. And the
damaged already.
Hugely damaged already, but catastrophically damaged if, frankly, we're tearing up our economic and security ties with our closest allies in the world. And I think it would, you assume people would put the jigsaw puzzle back together again, but quite often in life, if there's a nasty divorce, then things get worse. They don't get better when people leave. And I think, assuming...
When it's countries, it often ends in war.
Well, I don't think we're about to go to war with France, but I do think putting together, our relationship with those like-minded democracies we share on our continent is not going to be straightforward if we walk out the exit door.
Have you been surprised at just how bad it has been? The whole process?
Well, the handling of it.
Everything about it.
I think I don't think I have been surprised, because I fundamentally thought it was a disastrous idea that, and I could see the implications of what it meant. I mean, did I predict all the twists and turns of it? No.
Do you wish you'd fought harder against David Cameron not to hold the referendum in the first place?
Well, I fought pretty hard inside, but my relationship with David and with the team I was part of, the cabinet at the time, was we argued about things in private, but when we agreed something, we went out and fought. I don't think it would have made, if I'd said I'm resigning as Chancellor, it wouldn't have made any difference. No, but generally on
big strategic choices that you two were usually on the same page. So why did you end up on a different page on this one? And why couldn't you have prevailed if you felt as strongly as you did that it was the wrong thing to do?
Well, I did feel strongly. I'll argue my case. I thought it would split the Conservative Party, which it has. I thought it would put business offside with a Conservative government, and then fundamentally I thought there was a risk we would lose.
You always thought there was a risk?
I thought there was a risk. It's not what I thought.
I don't think David did.
I think people were too sanguine about the result, frankly. I mean, not just the cabinet I was part of, but the whole political world. And of course, in the end, you find a situation where the whole of Parliament votes for this referendum. It's not just Conservative MPs. Labour MPs voted for it too. And I don't think people really thought through. We are endangering a 50-year-old relationship with those we share this continent with.
And if I were to accept that Tony's team bears some responsibility in that you could argue that Iraq and other things led to Corbyn, and that Corbyn maybe wasn't the right leader for the Labour Party at the time of the referendum, would you also accept that austerity was a big part of the eventual result?
Well, first of all, I totally accept responsibility for being part of a team that had that referendum. I was the Chancellor of Exchequer in that government. Personally, I don't identify austerity as a cause, because
cuts to public services and low growth in wages.
Well, I would say
poverty.
Yeah, I don't think a historian, put it this way, would find it very difficult to explain that if you have a massive economic crash, which was unparalleled in our lifetimes, that it's going to have a big impact on the political system, because that's what's happened in all previous points in history. So I wouldn't say it was austerity.
Usually end in war.
I would say it was the financial crash and the consequences of that, which were cuts to public services and.
But they were choices you made. They were choices.
I don't think they were choices.
You went for a very you could have gone done what Ed Balls was suggesting you did, which is just a bit of a looser fiscal policy.
Well, if you get back into the arguments of the day, first of all, read Alistair Darling's memoirs. And he says they realised they were going to have to pay big cuts to public services. He was going to put up VAT if that government had been re-elected. And even if you take Ed Balls, who of course now actually I get on with very well, but he was arguing for a little bit more spending than I was proposing. But same essential plan, which was you had to do something about these unsustainably high deficits and the fact that the country was poorer and couldn't afford what it had. But I do think you can identify the seeds of discontent in the economic crash, in a sense that immigration was in some ways putting pressure on public services that were already under strain because of the cuts, and that very effective link, sadly effective, that the Brexiteers made between taking controlling our borders and money going into the NHS.
A lie.
Well, certainly.
Why didn't you call that out at the time?
Well, I would argue we did.
You didn't though. David Cameron was worried about was blue on blue. We're going to have to come back together. Don't go for Boris. But actually, why? I don't understand why you didn't absolutely go for them on that.
Well, I think if you look, there are lots of things we got wrong in that campaign. It was, a boring campaign. It was this enormous coalition of the TUC and the CBI and the Corbyn and Cameron and the Greens, and it moved at the pace of the slowest person.
Did you not feel that you and he were in charge of it?
No, I mean I was very frustrated, as indeed was David, about that the campaign wasn't working. We'd just fought and won a general election, so we knew what a winning campaign felt and looked like. And
was there a danger you tried to do the same thing?
Well, I think we ended up falling back on the one thing that was working, which was people who were otherwise inclined to vote to leave the EU were worried about the economic consequences, and that's a kind of classic campaign that we'd fought in the 2015 general election, that we'd actually just fought in the Scottish referendum a year earlier. So we fell back on that because there was no residue of enthusiasm in this country for European Union membership. The security argument didn't wash with people. When David Cameron set that out, people thought he was being alarmist about a Third World War. As it happens, I think the European Union is an incredibly successful project for stopping war.
So you didn't take Ireland seriously?
Well, I went to Newry. I was the first Chancellor Exchequer in about 100 years, literally, to go to Newry on the Irish border and talk about the Irish border problems. But the piece I did with the broadcaster wasn't run because it wasn't thought of as interesting. Tony Blair and John Major went to Derry. So attempts were made, but I'm not saying any of these were successful because we lost. Yeah. But I do think we're.
But were you surprised? Because I know David was. I've talked to him about this. Were you surprised at just how venal Johnson was, and were you all surprised at the fact that Michael Gove jumped to the other side?
Well, I wasn't surprised that Michael Gove jumped because I've known Michael a long time. He's a friend of mine. Lots of people can't understand why I'm still friends with him.
You're still friends with him.
I'm still a good friend of his, and I've tried to make sure, by the way, that this referendum doesn't shatter all my personal friendships and relationships.
But Johnson?
Well, I'll come on to him. First of all, Michael had always said he wanted to leave the EU. With Boris Johnson, I'd never heard him express that view. He wrote those 2 articles. So, with him, it was much less clear that he actually wanted to leave the EU. And, maybe he was, but he'd have to answer himself, positioning himself for a future Tory leadership contest.
But it was a pretty venal campaign.
Well,
the lies about health, the lies about Turkey.
No, I mean there were loads of lies told in that campaign.
And how do you take the line that they put, that it was lying on both sides?
Well, I don't accept that. I think there was a serious attempt on the Remain side to spell out the economic consequences of what was going on. And if you look at those forecasts, they're often dismissed now. Yeah. The medium term economic forecast produced by the Treasury under my watch, on my watch. Just before the referendum is still almost spot on with the forecast today. The country's seen its currency devalued. We've lost 2.5% of our GDP that we would otherwise have had in the intervening couple of years. That's this government's official estimate. So there have been real economic consequences, and there will be more to come.
Now you're commendably loyal to David Cameron. I admire loyalty to former prime ministers, much needed commodity in public life. Do you ever, would a journalist out there now who had a story that was really bad for Cameron, would they think twice about trying to put it on your desk? Do you feel that your friendships ever get in the way of your new life?
As a newspaper editor.
Yeah.
No, I try and edit the paper on the basis of what the readers want and should know.
They just want to stop Brexit. They've told me they just want to stop Brexit. That's all they want.
No, I mean, look, what I'm trying to do is, we'll wait for the...
Yes, thank you.
I like a bit of siren.
There you go. Off to the emergency ward in Westminster. No, the look. I first of all, I edit the newspaper absolutely with an eye to how what the reader wants. What makes the Evening Standard a good product? Is this the paper you've got to pick up to find out what's going on in British politics? So obviously, if we didn't cover a load of things, people would say it's not such a good product. Second, does it have attitude? Absolutely. It's unapologetically pro-European, pro-business. Socially liberal, those sorts of things, and it doesn't have a huge amount of time for the other side of the argument because it's expressing a view on behalf of London, I think. And then finally,
but London elected Sadiq as mayor. You're not that keen on him.
Well, he gets a pretty fair showing in the paper.
Do you think so?
Yes, absolutely. And we will often, in fact, we regularly run pieces by him. Does that mean it's uncritical? Of course not. He's the mayor. He should be held to account for promises he's made on knife crime, for example, or housing that he's not delivering on. But where he's done,
what about?
Well, when he's done good things like trying to bring communities together and speak for London on things like the European issue, we've been very supportive.
And does Mr. Lebedev interfere at all?
No,
Never.
no.
You're talking to somebody who's worked for Murdoch and Maxwell. Right. I know how these things work.
Well, I never met Maxwell, but I've met.
You're telling me he doesn't sort of say.
Well, yeah,
because I hear he's a bit too close to Boris Johnson for my liking.
No, he has not intervened in the politics of the paper. He takes a keen interest in the big campaigns we run, and they're often his thoughts and his ideas. For example, we did a big campaign over Christmas on HIV/AIDS with the Elton John AIDS Foundation, and that was Evgeny Lebedev's idea. But he owns the newspaper, and by the way, it's a very good campaign that has changed some attitudes. So. But in the politics, no. I mean, that's my judgment and my team's judgment.
As things are standing here and now, who do you think you'll come out for in the mayoral elections?
To be honest, I don't know. I mean, genuinely, I think the best way. I always used to think when I was back in politics that papers sold themselves too cheaply. That if you committed too early to a party, we went out of our way to try and get that, but you gave away some of your mystery and your purchase and your power, and we'll make a judgment of who we think is the best candidate. So whether it's Sadiq or Sean Bailey, we'll wait and see. But
and what would your front page say if Theresa May suddenly said, you know what, I know I said I was going to go before the next election, but I've decided actually I'm going to stay? What would you say about that?
I think we'd be not very sympathetic.
What on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate her premiership thus far?
We don't know. It hasn't ended yet.
Thus far. That's why I said thus far.
It's always important.
Are we closer to 10 or closer to 1?
We will see.
Tell me about.
I don't think it's been a spectacular success. Let's put it that way.
No. Tell me about when she sacked you.
Well, I mean, it was. I wasn't completely surprised because. I could see.
Because you screwed the economy and.
Well, the economy was doing pretty well at that point, but no, I could see she was coming in as a Remain supporting Prime Minister who just won the contest.
Did you see her as a Remain supporter?
Well,
even though you couldn't get to do anything in the campaign.
She was a little bit sotto voce.
I thought you all called her the submarine.
A bit sotto voce, I think is fair to say, during that campaign. But you pay the price. Actually, always it's an interesting thing about Prime Ministers. The thing that makes you is often the thing that breaks you. And I think because she didn't express clear views on Europe and then came in and just sort of ran with the Brexit means Brexit, she's never really known where she is in this debate.
What do you think her real view is?
Well, I think she's clearly, when I first met her in the 1990s, and she was a new Conservative MP, and she was on the liberal wing of the Conservative Party. She was and she was quite pro-European. And I think what I'll absolutely accept. I thought she was a good Home Secretary. I voted for her to be the party leader as an MP. I think she held that brief down, but she became increasingly frustrated that we couldn't deliver this immigration target, which in my view we should never have made.
Yeah.
And it was her responsibility
Why
as
did you
Home
make that?
Secretary.
Why
And,
did you-
and
why
she,
did-
I
why
think
did
she
you do
became
that?
more and more, well, because when it was first made, without getting into the history of it, we were trying to have an immigration policy that wasn't too controversial. Remember, we'd fought the Michael Howard 2005 campaign, which had been
Love
controversial.
my favourite campaign.
Yeah.
So bad.
Yeah. Well, I know, I wasn't in charge of it. And then we got to, we were the people who picked up the pieces after that campaign, and we wanted to be not controversial on immigration.
Right.
And the target of hundreds of thousands or 100,000 was actually where immigration was about the time. By the time we got elected, that's what the immigration to the country was, and then it went up a lot after we got in. Partly because I would argue we made the country a more attractive place for people to come to.
She does seem to have a far bigger obsession with immigration.
Well, I think
even the most Tories.
I think as Home Secretary, and I saw it was, when you're in Chancellor, and you get very focused on your economic targets and whatever. She got very focused on the immigration target, and because all the levers she could pull around students and economic migrants and family return and refugees, she either didn't want to pull or couldn't pull.
Yeah.
And then you ended up just focusing on this EU free movement, and I think she became, very focused on that. But the whole, too many Tories.
And so tell me about you get the phone call. The Prime Minister would like to see you.
I lived in Downing Street.
Oh, of course you were next door. Yeah.
I was in my
You
flat.
get the phone call.
Yeah.
You wander down.
She says, "Don't need you in the government anymore." I mean, had worked out.
Was there any small talk?
I had worked out that it was.
Did she do small talk?
Oh, I should say before I say anything, I said nothing about this meeting, and then her team at the time went and gleefully briefed it.
Oh, right.
So I kept my.
You feel justified there for telling me everything.
Well, she just told me, it's now reasonably well known, that she told me that her advice to me was I needed to go away and get to know the Conservative Party better.
What did you think?
Which I spent 2.5 years doing.
What did you think you lacked in your knowledge of the Conservative
Well, I think
Party?
what she was referring to
You
was...
didn't do enough leafleting in Maidenhead.
Well, I hadn't
Garden
got
parties.
round to that. But it was, I think she was saying that in the referendum, I had been too partisan, which of course other Conservatives, not least Brexit Conservatives, felt. But it's interesting, I had always through my career tried to match getting ahead in politics with what I believed.
Yeah.
And, they sometimes come into conflict, particularly
Did
in the early regimes of Ian Duncan Smith and Michael Howard.
Yeah.
But then, in that referendum, I could see I was, shredding my political capital with my colleagues the more I went on. But I actually thought, as Chancellor Exchequer, this is bloody close, and maybe I can shift the dial a couple of percent on the economy and the economic message. And I was sort of consciously trashing my own career. No, but I felt it was so important to win this contest that leaving was such a disaster. And then anyway, if we lost, it would be the end of us anyway.
Yeah. Did you sense then that she was like to do what she has subsequently done, which is constantly veer to that Brexit side of the ERG side of the argument?
Well, I think Is
that what she meant when you said you don't understand the party? That's where you've got to lean.
Well, I thought the mistakes, it's easy to criticise from the outside, but I think where the fundamental mistake she made was after getting elected. She had to get elected as a Remain supporting MP
Committed to Brexit.
in a context, and she had to prove she was committed to Brexit,
Yeah.
which is what Brexit means. Brexit meant.
Yeah.
Having done that, her fundamental mistake was not to do what you should do whenever you become leader of a party, which is then move to the centre of your party.
Try and bring people together.
And she sided with the hard Brexiteers. She drew those disastrous red lines, which have, cursed the country ever since, and cursed her premiership, or maybe hung over the country ever since and cursed her premiership. And even when there was a chance for a rethink, which was at the time she lost the majority in the general election, she doesn't rethink.
Yeah.
And so she's still committed. And in fact, if anything, she hardens the line. For the first year, as Prime Minister, she held open the option of staying in the customs union.
Yeah.
And that would have solved
Many
of the problems she's got today.
Yeah.
So, it's a terrible mistake, whether it's in the Labour Party or the Conservative Party, to basically be driven by your extreme.
But she's made mistakes at every stage.
Well,
She hasn't handled any
I
part
think
of
it's
this
fairly,
well.
obvious, or else she wouldn't be in the mess she's in now.
I mean, do you think she can survive days, weeks, months?
Well, I think fundamentally a Prime Minister who doesn't want to go is difficult to dislodge unless people are prepared to break cover and try and pull her down. And at the moment, no one really wants to do that.
Because of the fear of an election.
It's not a fear of election. I think it's a kind of classic "he who wields the knife never wears the crown"
But the cabinet,
kind of thing.
the
Although,
cabinet
you know,
is there
by
for
the way,
it.
there's lots of precedent in history of, like, Margaret Thatcher
Yeah.
was pretty ruthless against Ted Heath, and she walked away with it.
And when she finally went, it was the cabinet who pulled her down.
Yeah, so
Are you surprised about how pusillanimous the cabinet has been?
I think they're all making all these calculations about Brexit and where they are personally and so on. So,
But that seems to
you
come
know,
before.
whenever
That does seem to be coming before the country for a lot of them.
well, you know, the country also wants something impossible, which is it seems to want Brexit without the cost of Brexit.
I think the country now doesn't want Brexit.
Well, maybe that's shifting. But, you know, where I am, I'm not an MP anymore, but where I have some sympathy for the MPs is that they're constantly told, you know, you've never been such a useless bunch of MPs, they can't get anything. They're being asked to do something that's impossible.
I agree.
So it's not surprising
But
that they're failing.
she and the cabinet are totally dishonest about that, because they are pretending that there's something that can be done that they can support.
But
This can't be done without damaging ourselves.
well, that is why they're collectively struggling.
Yeah.
And I certainly agree with you that the country would be better led if you had people saying, and you know there are some very capable people in the cabinet who can do this. You know, this is what was promised. It's not deliverable. By the way, many of them didn't themselves promise it. So,
Yeah.
and you know what we can do is take you to here
Yeah.
and force you as a country to make a choice. Are you prepared to bear the costs of Brexit, or do you want to rethink? And that is not a question that either she nor the Conservative government at the moment is asking the country.
Was your very witty tweet that she should go away and spend some time getting to know her speaker a moment of coldly delivered revenge?
It was. You know, if you think too much about the social media posting, it doesn't work. You've got to just
Do it.
do it.
Okay.
I
But
mean,
do
you
you,
know, you're right? I mean,
do you sometimes sit there and think, oh, I can do a really, really nasty piece about her on this. I can. Do you feel a sense of
No,
personal
look, I think
revenge?
I think I don't. You know, I'm not.
Well, it's one thing to be
I don't-
sacked, but it's quite another thing to be sacked when you're the Chancellor and you helped Cameron get them into power. You gave her the majority that she subsequently has thrown away, and she's basically saying to you, "You're not up to this."
Well,
I feel a bit pissed off with that.
well, I wasn't, you know, the best. I wasn't. It wasn't the happiest day of my life, put it that way. But the, I think, you know, what I've tried to do. I mean, people don't believe me, so I accept this.
Tell me anyway.
But you know, I've tried to take the soap opera out of it. I mean, I've been in politics, you know, before long enough to know there's always a soap opera. Who's up? Who's down? Does so and so want revenge? Get so and so. I try to edit this paper, you know, as a professional editor, giving the newspaper character. And I think the faults we pointed out in the Prime Minister or in the Brexit strategy have been borne out
Right.
by events. And
You didn't feel it was like
and-
a vendetta.
no, and the you know, we made calls like 2 years ago. You know, I said she didn't have a majority to pass a deal. She'd have to go and get a customs union and a single market membership to get Labour support. I said 6 months ago there'd have to be a delay to Brexit. You know, I would like to think the Evening Standard is calling these things first before
Right.
other media outlets. And I'm doing that as a service to my readers by trying to read politics. And if I was just sort of blinded by, you know, the sort of personal animus, then it would not be a very good newspaper,
Do
right?
you-
And it's
do
so,
you feel
so
that-
you know, it's not there. And I don't, you know, I mean, I you know, believe it or not, I've sat down and had a drink with her since all of us.
Have you?
Yeah,
How was
and
that?
perfectly pleasant.
She's not great at small talk, though, is she?
Well, actually, we had quite a good conversation.
Tell me about that then.
No,
We'll
that's-
wait for number 10 to brief that one as well.
they don't brief. There's a different team at number 10 now.
Okay. Yeah. So what do you kind of feel about her now when she comes on the television and you see what do you feel about her?
Well, it's not. I don't have I say it's not particularly personal.
I have this real sense of.
I just
don't
want the
that woman to be
country. I
Prime
want
Minister,
the
'cause
country.
she can't do it.
Well, I think she is basically a prime minister in name only because she can't lead her
What are the
cabinet.
qualities she lacks that had prevented her from being a good
But
Prime Minister?
any Prime Minister in a situation with no majority having to deliver Brexit would be in a hole.
Merkel's never had a majority.
Look, by the way, I'm saying any Prime Minister in this situation would be in a hole. But there are things you can do to climb out of the hole. David Cameron, and when I was Chancellor, myself, we had fewer Tory MPs than Theresa May had. Right? What did we do? We went and formed an alliance with the Liberal Democrats, which everyone thought was undeliverable, would fall apart, was heavily criticised on left and right. But it gave the country a stable majority. She has not been able to construct
right. So what is it?
What
What is it in her that makes her unable to do that?
You have to interview her, but there is collectively in the Conservative Party there seems to be a resignation to losing the support of urban areas, losing the support of younger people, losing the support of ethnic minorities, losing the support of gay people. I work very hard with.
If you're a political party, that is madness.
Well, I worked extremely hard with David to win the support of
Do you think the
modernisation?
modernisation?
And we did get, by the time we got re-elected, we had something which I never thought was possible when I came into politics and Tony Blair was, all ascendant. And we got a majority of gay people voting Conservative. We got almost half of Indian origin people voting Conservative. We won in areas where we had never won before. We won back
Do you think
middle
that
class
project
areas.
is gone? Do you think the Cameroonian project is
No, I
over?
think there are a lot of people who would like to see it revived. I would call it modern compassionate conservatism. I don't think it's attached particularly to David or me. I think there are lots of people in the Conservative Party in Parliament who are really frustrated, and you can see it. You can see it kind of cracking at the seams, or coming apart at the seams. But it's there are lots of good Conservatives who want to hear more about the country as it is becoming, not the country as it was. And
when do you think she should go?
It's not my decision, really.
Who would you want to replace her?
Well, I don't know is the short answer because I don't know who's running. But I've got.
Who would you definitely not want to replace her?
I'm not getting into all of that.
Why not?
Because you have to wait and pick up your free copy of the Evening Standard.
No, but you're a voice. You're a voice. Well, let's.
I think it has to be you start with what is the job this person, has got to do, and this person has to reconnect the Conservative Party with modern Britain.
It's always about the party.
Well, that's the first job, right? And then they have to. But remember, it's a party contest first. And then as Prime Minister, they have to lead us out of this Brexit mess. And to me, that is a long delay while we rethink our strategy as a country.
Right, so Johnson can't do that.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what they've got to offer. So I'm not going to get into the names. Because, I'll tell you it's interesting. If you take the march that, you were involved in on Saturday, there were hundreds of thousands of people who were not socialist workers carrying socialist worker banners and chanting about austerity and whatever. There were hundreds of thousands of people, ordinary families, Middle England people, right, who many of whom have been in the past Conservative supporters right up until very recent elections, and should be in the future. But at the moment, the government and the Conservative Party is telling them that they are either saboteurs, traitors, don't want to, have no say in what's happening in the country.
No one likes we don't care appears to be.
Yeah, and that is frankly disastrous, both for the party and the country.
But, sorry to press you on this, but Boris Johnson is he is the leader of that. He has been a big part of that. So why can't you just state, as I think you should have done during the referendum campaign, by the way, that guy is not fit for high office. He's a liar, he's a charlatan, he's a cheat. Why can't you say that guy should not be Prime Minister?
I think he's demonstrated an admirable ability to change his opinion on things.
And you admire that?
Look, I'm not going to get into who should be the next leader.
But just give me that one. Just give me that. Boris,
I know.
Just give me. But you must have said it. What's the worst thing you said about Johnson in the paper?
I think we were pretty critical when he was unable to remember why Nazanin Zaghloul Ratcliffe was in Iran. Yeah.
That alone. Right, but his conduct during and since the referendum is a total disgrace. And you guys should call it out. And David should have called it out during the referendum.
In the referendum we had a big debate internally in Downing Street about whether to take on
you
and
didn't because it was about the party.
To be fair, one of the problems, and I think frankly the BBC didn't cover itself in glory in that referendum, was that the blue on blue soap opera was dominating the headlines. So, 2 days before Britain voted to leave the EU, the lead story on the BBC was that Steve Hilton, a former Tory advisor to David Cameron, was attacking David Cameron. And I phoned up and said, I remember phoning the BBC at the time and saying, we are about to make a decision that is going to completely change British politics.
Right, let's not waste our time.
No, what I'm saying is that there's a reason why we didn't want to.
No, I know.
That's what they were doing. That side of the campaign.
I don't think that's the real reason.
Well, I promise you that was we wanted to try and get people focused on the issues rather than the Tory soap opera.
I think it's all because you're all a bunch of mates and you'd all been at college together and you'd all been in the Bullingdon Club together and you didn't want to fall out. Seriously, and I mean the guy should not be allowed near high office again, and you won't even tell me that you don't think he should be Prime Minister. I find that incredible.
Well, as you'll have to wait and see what the Evening Standard says about a Tory leadership contest, which might happen.
So will you try and get
days after
get your owner to stop taking on his little private jet to Italy and having a nice time with him out there? Because that's a bit of a corrupt relationship in my view as well.
I'm not getting to
No.
that.
So, but you're still friendly with Gove. So by the way, if the headline of this interview was Johnson could be Prime Minister, says Osborne, you're okay with that?
Well, I think it's unlikely the paper is going to endorse Boris Johnson, but you'll have to wait and
But
see.
you don't agree with me that he's a liar, a cheat and a charlatan?
Well, I
Who
think
should have been called out by his colleagues a long time
the
ago.
Brexit campaign told the public a load of things that were not true.
So he's a liar. Charlatan? Changes his mind every 5 minutes. What about Gove? I'm amazed you go off to bloody see Wagner opera together, I read.
Yeah, you'll be welcome to come along.
No.
If you can get a ticket.
It's too long. Burnley might have a game that night. What? So you must have come close to rupture during the referendum.
Yeah, but I think first of all, as I said, I think I could let the whole thing shatter all my personal friendship.
Did it shatter any?
Well,
you don't need to tell me who, but did it shatter any?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who?
Well, no, absolutely. There are people I don't speak to, not because essentially I was all fallen out with, but to Michael Gove's credit, not that you will give him any, I'll tell you two things about him. One was he was the only other senior Conservative who didn't want a referendum. Right, he and me were the only two people arguing in the room against having a referendum. So you cannot really blame him that we had a referendum, except that we were all part of that government. And second, he made it clear all along that he had always been against EU membership. He used to write this when he was a journalist in the 1990s.
He was part of the Bent Banana
and he's been entirely consistent on that. So you also can't complain, as people do of Boris and others, that they've changed their opinion or whatever. And then finally, at the moment, he is also trying to stop the country crashing out of the EU without a deal. So, but that aside, he also, knows his Parsifal.
So, somebody will have to spell that one for me. So you're backing him?
I'm not backing. I didn't vote for him. Unfortunately, I voted for Theresa May.
And
if I'd had my vote again, I probably would have voted.
And how do you feel about the sort of the Jeremy Hunt, Sajid Javids, who we know
they're all
we
people
know
I
are
work
much
with,
closer to you
Yeah.
politically, but
Well,
are now
also-
sort of pretending to be all Brexity?
Well, they'll have to make their own decisions. I know lots of them, work with lots of them. They're very capable, sensible people. I guess a general advice to anyone at the top of politics is if you've got to stay anchored in what you actually believe is the right thing for the country.
But politics, screw you.
Alastair, there's in politics there are lots of twists and turns, and some days you're up and down or whatever, and you have to be pragmatic. You can't be an ideologue. But if you're not fundamentally rooted in what you think is the right outcome for the country, your government and the government you're advising can go completely awry. And I always tried to stay basically rooted in what I believed, and then adjust, deal with circumstances as they were thrown at me, using that as the kind of lodestar. And that is, so if you're running in this leadership contest promising one thing, which is undeliverable, a painless Brexit, a Brexit bonus, and then you find yourself, well done, you've won the contest, the day afterwards, you will have as disastrous premiership as Theresa May has had.
So don't elect anybody who's going to do that.
Well, just
but they're all doing it.
Don't get into the.
They're all doing it.
Well, yes, but they're not in. Well, they're not in the contest yet.
But nobody.
They're in her cabinet, which is different.
Okay.
Right. When you get to the contest, the person who is honest with the country
about Brexit,
about the compromise. If you want Brexit, you're going to be poorer. You're going to be less secure. You're going to be more isolated country. That's the price of Brexit. If you want to be more international and richer and better off, and the poorest parts of the country better off, then you have to accept pooling of sovereignty, working with your neighbours.
Your members are not going to elect that person, are they?
The Conservative membership is the same membership that supported the Cameron government.
But it's
international development. A green government, gay marriage. Yeah, we had our arguments and people disagree with it, but the Conservative membership as a whole supported all of those things. And that was only 2 or 3 years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago, right? So parties need to be led, right? And don't tell me in the Labour Party that, there aren't still there many, sensible social democrats on the centre-left of British politics who despair of what's
Hundreds
happening.
of thousands.
But they can't. Many of them have taken the decision better to stay in, try and modify these things.
So
would you advise? Let's take Keir Starmer, who I've got a lot of, I don't know him personally at all, but I think he's doing a pretty admirable job. Is our British politics better served by him walking out the door and resigning from Corbyn's shadow cabinet, or is it better to have him there, trying to be a bit more sensible than his leader? And so I think a lot of the people I know who are in the cabinet, who are my friends or people I work with, they're having to bite their tongue because they've taken a view, which is it's better to be trying to shape events from the inside than shout from the outside.
But George, hold on, just be honest. Jeremy Hunt and Sajid Javid, they have moved to where they've moved because they know she's dead, and they're waiting until she dies, and then they're positioning themselves already because they know that their party won't elect somebody who tells the truth about Brexit.
We'll see what we don't know who's going to run, but we will see what people say. My own advice would be, win it on your own terms.
And tell the truth about Brexit.
Tell the truth about what the first question. I mean, most of these leadership contests, I ran David Cameron's leadership contest in the past, have been, who's this person? What's their background? What's their message about social mobility? Here's their little interesting speech on public service.
Can they do a speech without notes? Blah.
Well, that proved pretty effective when it was necessary. Stop that election you were trying to organise. And had you right between the crosshairs. I seem to remember. This leadership election is not going to be about that. It's going to be question one: how do you get us out of this Brexit mess, right? And if you are,
so do you think therefore somebody who comes along and says the way out of this Brexit mess is to find a way literally out of this Brexit mess, we don't do it, would they have any chance at all of leading the Conservative Party?
I think if you are straight with the Conservative Party in this contest, there is no reason why you can't win it and be, politics is about leadership.
So there's only Amber Rudd or Matt Hancock or Hammond or who?
We'll see. We'll see who, but the contest, in politics, people can be leaders, right? And you can shift opinion. You can, at the moment,
that's what we've lacked.
At the moment, the Conservative Party and dare I say the Labour Party have all been, drifting along, drifting rightwards or leftwards, depending on which party.
Do you think
and what they need is some good, charismatic, honest leadership, and that is available if people would let themselves be themselves.
Do you think that the country, as I wrote in your paper this morning, do you think the country has kind of decided that they're not having Corbyn as Prime Minister? Or do you think he might be?
Well, I think I think to write off the opposition when they're only a few seats away from being able to form an alliance in the Commons that puts them in charge is a mistake. Do I think Corbyn has done everything possible to make a Labour victory less likely? Yes. Do I? I think he's hindering Labour's chances, not helping them. And would Labour be much further ahead if they had another leader? Yes.
What's your assessment of McDonnell having had him across the dispatch box, where you can usually work people out?
Well, we've got his. I've got his Mao's red book actually over there on the desk, which he threw at me in the House of Commons.
Remember that? Yeah.
Look, I don't agree at all with his politics. I think he's more presentable than Corbyn. I think, fundamentally what puts people off Corbyn is not just his views. There'll be many people who have some sympathy with those views. On economics and things. It's the associations he made with, unpleasant people. It's the failure to sing the national anthem properly. It's, things that just really offend good, decent people in this country. And I think if you remove that, even if you had a very left-wing leader of the Labour Party, because of what the Tory party is doing, the door would be open to a Labour victory. Now, the Tory party can shut that door it were to move back to the centre and represent the mainstream of this.
But let's just say, I know it's not going to happen, but let's say there was a general election today, maybe Corbyn.
I think it'd be close, yeah.
And you think he could win? He could win.
Well, he only needs to win, and by the way, not just him, but the Liberal Democrats
yeah.
and the SNP, because they'd all be in an alliance together. They only need to win, I think it's like 5 seats off the Conservatives, so it's not very many.
Yeah.
But it would be, but because Corbyn's very, has not been successful, he's repelling people, so that's why it's close.
Yeah. Do you just very briefly going back to your time as Chancellor? I'm sure you'd have read my last volume of diaries. You'll be aware that I can't remember. Very angry that the Labour, Tony's successors, in my view, allowed you to get away with this. Labour crashed the car, it was all our fault, that's why we had to do the cuts, and never really properly defended our record. Were you surprised that you were pretty much the only political strategist around the world who were able to pin the crisis so directly onto one government?
Well,
or do you think that was inevitable?
I think, well, first of all, I think they do bear some of the responsibility. I mean, they were in office at the time, and decisions were made, about banking regulation or about the finances of the country, which made Britain more vulnerable to the global crash. But without going over all of that, frankly, if something like that happens on your watch, you're screwed anyway, right? I mean, and I think almost all the governments that were in office
went eventually.
And some of their
Merkel?
and well, Merkel, no, but of course the crisis didn't affect Germany nearly as much as everyone else.
Yeah, sure.
But across
that's
Europe,
because it's a strong and stable country.
Well, there are things we can.
They had that brilliant, very rough finance minister. What?
No, well, he was the person actually I had my closest
he was
partnership
in the FT.
Wolfgang Schäuble. He was
my in the FT.
Of all the finance ministers I've worked with, he was the one I was sort of closest to.
Right. What? Just on your new life, do you? I know a lot of people in football, and I always am amazed by people like Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher, who seem to find punditry kind of almost as enervating as being a player, which I just think it must be so second best. Do you not feel that this now is totally?
Well, I wouldn't say
best?
It's punditry. I'm not just writing.
No, I know you're not a pundit, but but you don't feel it's second best.
No, I don't actually. I mean,
Really?
well, look, did I want to be fired as Chancellor Exchequer?
No.
Right. But
do you not wish you were there now?
Well,
even as a backbencher?
No, not particularly, because
you don't wish you were going through the lobbies tonight, voting on this and making a difference, and being part of that. Because I mean, be honest, you do love the political game.
No, of course, I enjoy politics, and I gave most of my adult life to politics. But I tell you, it's an amazing. You know this. It's an amazing thing to do. It's all consuming. Politics is all consuming. It's fantastically interesting and complicated, and I love all the kind of bits of it, which is not just what's the right policy, but how do you get the policy implemented, and how do you present it, and how do you... All of that I loved. But it is also pretty damaging. I mean, it's a bit of a crazy business.
Yeah.
And it's only when you stop, I stopped, I realised, my God, I was working every hour of the week.
You've only got about 10 jobs.
And yeah, it's still not as all-consuming as being Chancellor Exchequer. And so I had been Chancellor and Shadow Chancellor for 11 years. It was like a long period. Yeah. So I think the trap when you leave politics, for whatever reason, is you go on the speaker circuit. You get paid essentially your kind of annual salary for speeches, and it's very
soul destroying.
It's very transactional, and you're not building anything, and you're basically talking about what other people are doing that you used to do, like you've been asking me in this interview. But
that's what you do now.
No.
That's what you do.
No, because I decided after doing that for a year that I needed to do something real, and I wanted a real second career and a real job. And going to edit a newspaper is a real job. There are 200 people out there in the newsroom who depend on my editorial judgments and on our ability to make this newspaper pay for itself.
But you just said yourself that you're going and you're talking about stuff that other people.
I don't mind doing that because I'm also shaping the. Look, of course I understand. I'm not going to. It's not possible to say George Osborne. Let's forget he was Chancellor for all those years of was involved in these events. Of course, I understand that, and I don't mind talking about it. And the newspaper needs to talk about it every day. And by the way, there are big decisions affecting our country, which I'm a citizen.
By the way, are they allowed, if they got free reign, if they want to sort of say, you look at all the people sleeping on the streets here, you don't have to go very far to see them now, to actually, could they write a piece now saying they are the direct responsibility of George Osborne's strategy as Chancellor?
Well, it wouldn't be an accurate piece, so they can't.
But could they do that? Because lots of people think that.
They can absolutely cover, and we do, the homeless problem in London.
No, but you don't really pin it on...
Well, because I don't think that's true, right?
It's got to be a factor.
But
universal credit is a huge part of poverty in this country. Do you cover food banks very much?
Well, we cover, of course.
I'm not saying you're solely responsible.
Our campaign last year was about.
Okay, I'm not saying, but could I write a piece for you saying piss off with your food bank campaign, Osborne? This is your fault, which I could do for the Daily Mirror, say. Would you allow me to write a piece?
Well,
like that?
I'm absolutely open to people writing, balanced pieces which include the history of the government I was part of, but. But
do you not think the fact that you've been such a high-profile serving politician is bound to, even subconsciously, they think, I can't say that.
Well, I think
Of
course it's very different from the history of most editors, but it comes with, in fact, all editors. It's unique. No one in modern British history has gone from, a high office to editing a newspaper.
It's usually the other way.
Yeah, and with great effect. But I
think Dacre should have got into politics. He did be great.
But it's with it comes there are disadvantages, but there are also advantages, and the advantage is you get someone who I hope readers feel can anticipate where events are going, inform them of things, and also has the confidence to make editorial judgment calls. So the Evening Standard is not shy about saying what it thinks. And I'm like, I sometimes would think of it as like conducting a great orchestra. They're all really brilliant violinists and, people who play the clarinet and whatever. But a good newspaper has a character and identity. And I think the Evening Standard has a strong character and strong identity. And that is reflected in the success of the paper out there with its readers.
Okay. Are you not a bit troubled? Have the Saudis got money in it? Did I read that?
Well, there is an investment from a Saudi media company in the holding company that includes the Evening Standard.
Is that a good thing?
Well, it's a good thing that people want to invest in British journalism.
Right, but I mean,
I think the days when, and of course that was appalling, and we covered that extensively in the paper. But the days when British newspapers were owned by Britons, I think passed about 100 years ago, right?
That is, and has that been good for our culture or bad for our culture?
This isn't a charity. Right?
No.
But I mean, newspapers are not, they are not public service broadcasters. No. They're not the BBC. They are privately owned businesses, right? And by the way, you wouldn't want government newspapers or public newspapers. And they, and this is an international country. We've just been arguing about that for the last hour about how it should be, that attracts business and investment and people from
But you also know why people put their money into newspapers. Partly ego, the sort of Maxwell thing, but also power and influence. So you have Saudi Arabia, MBS, who has pretty strict control over his own media, but then sort of comes over here and would maybe get involved in something like that. Is that good for our culture?
Well,
maybe I don't know, but I'm just asking whether it is.
As I say, it's a Saudi media company, but
that doesn't happen like that.
Well, look, all I can say is the great thing about a newspaper is there's no hidden agenda because it's all there in black and white every day.
Up to a point.
And you can see, we cover criticism of the Saudi government as aggressively as anyone else, and we cover the death of that poor Saudi journalist as much as anyone else. So we don't. And ultimately, the test of it is this. First of all, you can see it in print every day, and second, I would not. If I felt I was being compromised, it's not like I couldn't go and do something else. So there is. I'm a check on the editorial integrity as any editor should be.
Did you think, just on other sort of geopolitical stuff, do you feel at all you got too cosy with the Chinese, given what they're up to now?
No, I don't at all, because I think here. I mean, briefly put, here is the world's biggest country with the largest population and the longest. It's the biggest, most populous nation on Earth. It's the longest existing civilization on Earth. and it is, for 18 of the last 20 centuries, it's been the biggest economy, and it's going to be again shortly. Now we can either say that's illegitimate, we are going to confront it, we're going to contain it, we're going to park our aircraft carriers off its shore and head down a path of confrontation and possibly even conflict. And that is what's often happened in the world when you've failed to deal with these new emerging forces. Or we can say, let's try and make them partners in stability and peace, by the way, just like the European Union did with 70 years ago. And
you don't think they're really kind of.
Well, that doesn't mean they're also.
Stuff.
That doesn't mean I approve of their political system and the lack of human rights. It doesn't mean that I think their theft of intellectual property is acceptable and so on. But I'd much rather work with them as trying to solve these problems and solve other problems in the world than sort of head mindlessly down a path of confrontation.
Who do you feel kind of?
I mean, I've not seen this. What is the strategy of confronting China?
No, I broadly agree with you.
And then that's just not smart.
What about so if you sort of take Trump, Europe, Putin, China, those four kind of baskets of alliance, how would you just?
Well, I wouldn't leave the Europe basket, which is what we're attempting.
Would you put that as the most important at the moment?
Of what?
Our relationships.
Our relationship, yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And where does Trump figure?
Well, America is our most important security relationship.
And Trump?
And it exists beyond who's the president.
Okay.
I mean, but as it happens with Trump, and I tried to do this in the newspaper, there are some things he's done which I approve of, right? I think some of his tax reform is very similar to the things I did as Chancellor and makes the American economy more competitive and attracts more jobs.
Do you think he's a terrible, do you think he's a hideous human being?
Well, I think the problem with him, if you're his ally, America's ally, is you just don't know how he's going to react to things. And an unpredictable ally is not a reliable ally, and that's a big problem for Europe.
And what about his values? Do you feel you have anything? Do you feel his values are the same as yours?
No.
In what way?
Well, I'm not. I haven't paid porn stars to do whatever he's done. I don't have his values, but I
was thinking more of sort of racism and sexism, but no, you put it like that.
No, what I'm saying is,
and Putin. What do you think of Putin?
Well, I think the problem is the kind of.
By the way, I always ask about Putin at every interview.
Don't worry, I'm coming on to the character of Trump. Kind of does a bit detract from. I mean, people are so blinded by their dislike of him. Look, this week
and their like of him.
Well, yeah, and this week
some of them.
Yeah, and he, of course, he basically proved that politics have been totally disrupted by technology in our lifetimes, just like it's disrupted newspapers and music and all that, by showing you could win a presidential election campaign off your mobile phone. And when you and I were active in politics, no one believed that was remotely possible. Yeah. Indeed, it wasn't possible because they didn't have the technology. Now, Putin, again, the thing about him is, what is deeply frustrating is we should be trying to work with Russia. Russia, again, is a long-standing, ancient civilization and all that. And every time we try, they go and do something that is totally unacceptable, like kill people in Wiltshire or try to kill people. And, or kill people in central London. And that is, I'm 100% with what the government has to do, which is...
pretty weak, though.
Well, there's what are you supposed to do other short of invading Moscow?
Difficult.
I mean, the sort of tragedy is, there are a lot of problems out there in the world, whether it's, terrorism or, climate change or, poverty in Africa and the migration problems that causes, where you really want to be working with all these countries.
Yeah.
And Syria is a classic example where the failure of countries to work together led to hundreds of thousands of people dying.
And the failure of you guys to get the thing through Parliament. Why did David throw the towel in straight away that night? I've never understood that.
Well, because we lost a vote in Parliament thanks to
as Theresa May shows,
the terrible opportunism of the Labour leader.
But you can go back, you can try again.
I seem to remember Ed Miliband being pretty instrumental in that.
Yeah, but Theresa.
Well, no, there was the House of Commons that voted not. It was a one-issue thing, which is do you launch missiles against? By the way, I think it's kind of interesting. I don't want to use the I word with you, but as a young Conservative MP, when I first joined Parliament as an opposition MP, the Iraq War was the issue. and I voted in 2003 for the Iraq War, and ever since then, all the cases against intervention has been made.
I know.
The loss of
Because
life.
we've learned the long lessons.
Well, the loss of life, and the British soldiers, the people in Iraq who lost their lives, and the kind of chaos. But in many ways, Syria is an example of ones when you don't intervene.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting.
So it's Yemen.
Yeah, in Yemen, and so for this generation, they're beginning to learn the price of not intervening,
Correct.
and that's an interesting
Yeah, I agree with that.
shift in our politics.
Just one final quick thing. You could argue, you talked about the crash, and that's what's kind of done all this to us. You kind of have a feeling that with nationalism, you and I would agree it's the wrong response, but it is a response. Socialism is a response, okay? Or you could see where the socialist an out-and-out socialist might respond to this.
Yeah.
What does kind of liberalism do? How does liberalism reinvent itself in this kind of really crazy?
Well, I don't think we
world?
should. I fundamentally don't think we should give up, right? And I don't want to accept that the other side has got a point, right? Because I think the path that they lead down, whether it's far left socialism or this nativist nationalism, is a road to ruin for our country, and is going to make the people, often those who support it, poorer and worse off. And so, I don't want to say, they've got a point about immigration, or maybe they've got a point about public ownership of the utilities. I think that is a path to poverty for our nation, and we should be more confident about making our argument, accepting the fact that we're still in the sort of afterwash of this enormous financial crash.
But you don't have a sense of where these news ideas.
ideas
are coming. Are you saying we just go back to the old ideas?
No, I think you can educate people about the benefits of immigration. You can educate people about the benefits of business. It doesn't mean you're going back. You go forward. I'm, for example, a big advocate of regulation of tech companies and technology. That's quite interventionist. If anything, I became over my time in politics more interventionist. So things like the Northern Powerhouse, I could see, a Conservative Chancellor
Still got shit transport links to Burnley.
Well,
by the way.
but it should be
Get it sorted.
So that's the sort of thing the government should be able to do.
Yeah.
And so, those are ideas where, public health. I introduced a sugar tax, which is actually one of the things I'm proudest of doing. All the political advisors said I was completely mad to put a tax on Coca-Cola. It's now one of the things I look back on my legacy and think that was something that really has helped people's lives. These are interventionist, compassionate, progressive centre-right things.
Do you think?
And you can. So I come from the centre-right of politics, and there is a whole agenda out there about education reform, public health, the regulation of technology, that a Conservative Prime Minister could grab with both hands if they weren't totally obsessed with and consumed by Brexit, which is entirely destructive.
Have you seen Daniel I. Blake?
I haven't, no.
Why not? You're a cultural leader in London and
Yeah.
the UK. You should.
Yes, well, I've had it recounted to me.
I think you should see it. I had another question, and then I'm done. Oh shit! What was it?
I think he has a similar view of Ian Duncan Smith
To you?
Right now.
Did you get that one? He slagged off Duncan Smith, but not Boris Johnson.
No, some people I know, I said.
Oh, I see. Oh no, I'll tell you what it was. You talk about the tech companies.
Yeah.
You're in a newspaper now. Facebook, Google,
Yeah.
Apple, the Gaffer, and all that lot. What's your kind of good thing, bad thing for the world?
Well, basically a good thing, because they've created an amazing way for us all to communicate and receive entertainment, and created groups that could never otherwise exist, on the internet. And that's fantastic. But they are too big. They grew up when rules didn't exist, because this was all brand new, and rules need to exist to make sure that they face the same sort of editorial constraints that an editor of a newspaper faces.
But do you think, is it possible?
And that they don't get too big and monopolistic, which they're clearly becoming. That their news judgments are properly verified. I mean, all of these things. I think it's all coming.
Do you?
In fact, a great agenda for anyone who wants to be a modern progressive politician is, let's do the regulation in a good way that supports the market, creates competition, doesn't kill it, but at the same time protect society from its
So
worst
would
aspects.
you hope that Nick Clegg, having gone to Facebook, for example, would you hope that actually he goes there partly as a politician and
Well,
starts
I
to
think
shape that agenda himself?
Look, I think he's already, before he arrived there, he had said lots of quite interesting things about regulation technology.
Yeah.
So
So you think it is
well, I think
possible?
it's certainly an interest. I can totally understand why he wanted to do and took that job.
But can it be done on a nation by nation basis, or does it have to again?
Well, no, I mean fundamentally, again, we are going to be so much weaker outside the EU doing it. I mean, the person who can do this is the competition commissioner in the EU.
Yeah.
And I'd be amazed when there's a new commission later this year if that's not front and centre of their agenda.
Yeah.
And having a European view on technology regulation, Chinese and American, is a great thing. But obviously, Britain alone, no one's going to pay much attention.
Yeah.
Europe, market of 500 million people,
Yeah.
where most of a lot of the profits for these companies come from. Yeah, he has a real clout.
Last question, and I've forgotten what it was. I had just popped it in my head. I thought that's a great question, and now it's gone again.
As my teacher would have said, wouldn't have been a very good question then, would
No,
it?
it was. It was a really good question. It's literally just popped back in my head. So, last question, which wasn't the last question I was going to ask you. You talked about how you kind of feel less pressured and that. Did you? And I know this that the family kind of there's real pressures when you're in one of those high-profile jobs. Do you feel your own life is happier, better than it was?
Well, it's less sort of monomaniac. It's like when you're in that sort of
Octomaniac.
Well, when you're when you do those top political jobs, they're just all-consuming, and they're pretty damaging actually to people around you because everyone's sort of fair game. Your friend, or your brother, if they've done something they shouldn't have done, the other side go for it because it's a way of getting at you.
Yeah.
And it's not pleasant and it's pretty brutal. And that's what, by the way, politics in every country at all times in history have been like. And
Not worse than before?
I don't think so.
Now?
I think it's always
Okay.
been a bit like that. And it's but I think I had a fantastic time. I was unbelievably lucky to be at the top of it. I'm proud of what we did, but I'm not, being out of it. There are a lot of good compensations.
So, were you on the march on Saturday?
I wasn't. No,
Why not?
I was with my daughter in East Anglia, but my mother was on the march.
Oh,
so
good.
the Osborne family was represented.
Excellent.
My mother has a great record. She went on the anti-Vietnam march in the 1960s,
Right.
the anti-Iraq war march in the 2000s,
How dare she.
and the People's Vote march
Good.
twice.
Good. So, what did you think of it?
So I got lots of photographs
Okay.
from my mum.
And
during
what
the
did
day.
you must have sort of seen a bit
Yeah.
of the coverage of it.
Well, first of all, it was very impressive from just the sheer scale of it.
Hmm.
I think what was also really impressive was, it wasn't full of kind of your usual agitators and socialist worker posters. This was Middle England on the march, and there's a very large number of good citizens of our country who feel very strongly about their future, and there's a kind of interesting, the politics of it are interesting. I mean, obviously they're trying to achieve a second referendum, but if none of the mainstream political parties can find a home for these people, they will go and find a home. I mean, I think you are seeing a movement being created.
And do you think it was interesting as well that when Theresa May did that dreadful address from Downing Street, that revoke petition, which has been around for ages, suddenly just went absolutely...
No, it's
ballistic.
it's like, I think at the time, when we're
Went to
5 million
yeah.
people now have signed
Yeah.
it. That is it. And, I know people say, oh, it's not 17 million who voted in the referendum or the 60 million who voted to remain,
Yeah.
but it's still a hell of a lot of people. And now, you feel like the country is being mobilised, and you feel the politics of the country are shifting quite dramatically, and that the old political parties are creaking at the seams trying to accommodate that.
That's why I wrote
And,
that piece, which has led to us doing this, is that I don't understand why the parties are scared of the European elections. Because the party that comes out clear, strong, against Brexit seems to me is going to do very, very well.
Well, there's frankly a golden opportunity to create a Remain party if we go ahead with the European elections. Maybe only for the European elections itself.
What, and field candidates everywhere?
Well, you field candidates everywhere just on the Remain ticket, and there'll be a Brexit party, Nigel Farage's party, and the mainstream parties, because they can't accommodate the aspirations of all those people who are on the march, all those people who are signing the petition, they will be sidelined in this election. It's not too late for either of the parties.
Unless they move.
But they've got to move. Otherwise, you are opening the door to this issue becoming the mobilising force for a new generation.
If that happened, if a Remain party was formed for the European elections, would you back it in the paper, or might you see that as your route back into politics?
No, I'm happy editing my paper, but I do. But I guess the politician in me sees this large group of people who feel unrepresented, who feel angry that they're not being listened to, and they've been dismissed, they've been derided as saboteurs and traitors and all of that.
And it's the other side who seems to have all the anger.
What's
that about?
You can feel that the rebellion is moving now. It's gone from people who wanted to bring down the system and to this group who are growing in number, and they will become a very potent political force and potentially extremely destructive of the other two of the main political parties, unless one or other of the party leaderships works out how to accommodate it. As it happens, I don't think Corbyn ever will, nor will Theresa May. She's not capable of that. So it will be open to the next Conservative leader, who may be coming very shortly. And if they fail, I think the door is wide open to a new political party. And for some time I thought it was unlikely that there'd be a new political party. But I feel with the march, with the petition, with the way people are, in the best sense of the word, being radicalised by this issue, that the door is being opened. And the Conservative Party can still shut that door, but time's running out.
And do you see the Chuka Umunna, Anna Soubry, Heidi Allen, Philip Lee, etc. group, do you see that as it or not?
Well, I know quite a few of them individually, not all of them. I think many of them done very courageous things and been unable to remain in their own parties. I don't think that's the new party, but it's the fact that both Labour and Conservative are losing people off their moderate wing, which is frankly unprecedented. In your day you would pull moderate Tories off Labour and moderate Tories and get them to join Labour, and we were trying to do the same of moderate Labour and get them to join Tories.
They're both deliberately repelling.
But now they're repelling, but both parties are shedding into the centre, and so I think it's the start of something. I think it's significant. I think it's particularly significant in the Labour Party, because a lot of those people who've joined this group would have hoped to be in a Labour cabinet in more normal times. It's the start of something, but I'm not sure that's where it's going to end up. I think the door is open to a new force, and the European elections, if they're held, could be the starting point, could be where that new party is born.
Cool.
Did you want to ask the newspaper question, or
Which one was that?
What was that?
editing the newspaper? What line would you pick out? Or are you leaving that?
The one I just gave you.
Actually that's quite good. Actually that's almost certainly true. That's a good question. Sorry.
Politician and editor.
So George, honestly, thanks for all your time.
Yeah.
Very long interview.
Yeah,
sorry. So thanks for your time. Promise you this is the final question. If you were the editor, say, of a magazine or a national newspaper that was reading an interview that was in a magazine, what would you pick out as the story of what we've discussed?
Well, newspapers are called newspapers because they're about the future, about news, not about the past. So I think what I was saying there about the People's March and the new political force emerging in Britain is something, if I hadn't said it, we would have put on the front page of my newspaper.
Okay. So you don't want Johnson could be PM, says Osborne. You don't want that.
That's the kind of
that's sort of spintastic, isn't it?
There's a bit, Malcolm Tucker.
You don't want May has been the most useless Prime Minister in history.
I think that's been written.
Right. I think you could be right. Yeah. Osborne. You didn't quite Osborne backs new party.
No, I'm pointing to a political force that's
Osborne
emerging.
warns Tories and Corbyn of new party.
I'm not sure I'm worried. I think
You're not worried about Corbyn.
Yeah.
Corbyn could win elections, says Osborne.
Well, that's obvious because he's the leader of the opposition.
I know, but still news if you say it.